High school is so last year. So this time around, with Scream 2, we've moved on to college. Will Greek life, a non-psychotic boyfriend, and a theater major save Sidney Prescott and her friends from being the victims of a ghost face killer? Absolutely not. But today we're going to be taking a look at what exactly could have saved Sidney's friends as we take a look at everyone who dies in Scream 2 and if they could have lived. Kicking things off, Scream 2 gives us two opening scene deaths in the form of a couple attending the premiere of the first Stab movie, a film based off of the events of the first Scream movie. The first of the two to die is a man named Phil at 8 minutes in. After entering the bathroom during the film, he hears someone whispering in the stall next to him, so he puts his ear against the divider between the stalls, and Ghostface plunges a knife through the divider into his face. Since there was no sign of danger beforehand, and Phil couldn't even see the knife before it was plunged into his face, I'm going to say that his death is slated. Next, at 10 minutes in, Phil's girlfriend Maureen is killed by Ghostface in front of a packed theater. And there are a few things that I find incredibly frustrating about her death. The first being that after killing her boyfriend, Ghostface seems to know exactly where to sit in the theater and that Maureen's boyfriend was the guy he just killed. While the two were college students at the same school as Sidney and one of the killers, it doesn't seem clear to me that Ghostface would have known the two of them. While it's possible, it's also completely normal for people to not know everyone at their school. So I find this to be a bit weird. Secondly, no one helps Maureen after she has been stabbed because half of the people in the theater are wearing Ghostface costumes and most are going wild over the film's events. So then I suppose the reasoning is that anyone who noticed her screams figured that she was playing along, and I can kind of see that, but this does seem more like movie magic is pulling the strings. Despite these questionable details, Maureen's death is definitely one of the more iconic in the series, alongside Tatum and Casey's deaths. After reaching towards Ghostface for comfort, thinking he is her boyfriend, she notices blood on her hands and realizes something is up. After seeing this blood, she acts way too slowly and is stabbed by Ghostface. She then gets up to escape, but is too slow because of her injuries and is ignored by the audience as she is stabbed further. Eventually, she makes it to the front of the theater where people begin to notice what is going on, but at that point, it is too late and she succumbs to her injuries. For the sharp-minded kind of person that Maureen shows herself to be at the start of the film, I find her slow reaction to the blood on her hands to be strange. I think she had plenty of time too and absolutely could have reacted faster and moved away from Ghostface before she was stabbed. But even after being stabbed, there were a few opportunities for her to get help. One member of the audience notices Maureen's blood, but too much is unfolding in the theater for the witness to find her. Because of this chaos in the theater, I think that Maureen would have had better luck going up to someone and tapping them on the shoulder or whatnot to get their attention and help rather than screaming and crying. She has the opportunity to do this at one point as a woman squeezes right past her in the theater's walkway. In the end, Maureen's death is tricky as she was surrounded by help and yet no one was aware enough. I'm not really sure about her death because of this, but after receiving some input from friends, I'm going to say that getting help would have been tricky and her death is slated. The next to die at 34 minutes in is Cece, a sorority girl who is left alone after skipping out on a party to fill the role of sober sister. And girl does not go down without a fight. Her reaction time is excellent as she gets surprised attacked and still manages to duck under Ghostface's knife. She then jukes the killer by making a sharp turn up the stairs and proceeds to defend herself with everything she can by throwing objects at Ghostface. I will say that she misses the opportunity to push a grandfather clock on the killer, which would have allowed her to momentarily incapacitate the killer, jump over the clock, and run down the stairs and out the door. But it also could trap her on the upper floors if she could not crawl over it. Being on the upper floors is what inevitably gets her killed as she is pushed through a glass door onto the balcony, stabbed in the back as she fights to get up, and then thrown over the balcony where she dies from a 3-story fall. After watching this scene, my only idea for Cece would have been to utilize the grandfather clock. It has been said that going up the stairs in a horror movie is a death wish. But in such a frantic situation, Cece's decision makes a lot of sense. If she hadn't made the sharp turn up the stairs, Ghostface would have caught up to her. Furthermore, if she had held onto Ghostface on the balcony, maybe she wouldn't have died from the fall, but then she would have just been stabbed to death. Because Cece fights hard and proves herself to have a decently sharp mind, I believe she could have used the grandfather clock to knock Ghostface out, escape the house, and run to the party down the street for help. So I'm going to say that Cece could have lived. Next up, Randy meets his demise at 1 hour 5 minutes in after being dragged from behind into Gail's cameraman's van and stabbed to death. We do not see much of Randy after he is dragged into the van. In fact, we don't see the inside of the van at all except through a mirror that is pointed at Ghostface. So I cannot tell what, if anything, Randy could have done to live once inside of the van. However, before he is dragged into the van, he is with Gail and Dewey when they get a call from the killer. Gail and Dewey then search the park while Randy keeps him talking. I'll give Randy some credit as he keeps an eye on his surroundings, but I do not think he is cautious enough, especially in regards to the van behind him. Perhaps he trusted the van as he knew who it belonged to, but I'd say Randy was smart enough to not have his back to one thing for too long. Because we do not see Randy's final moments and cannot tell if he had anything to use to his advantage inside of the van, and because my friend's favorite character is Randy and she'll be angry if I say his death is slated, I'm going to say that this situation is unclear. At 1 hour 26 minutes in, the detectives escorting Sidney to a safe house are killed while their car is stopped at a stoplight. When Ghostface first strikes, the detectives have their heads turned to Sidney and her friend Hallie in the back. So the first detective to die did not see the killer coming. Since his death was in two unexpected motions, as Ghostface breaks his window and slits his throat, I'm going to say that his death is slated. The second officer, however, has more time. When he gets out of the car, Ghostface is able to take a hold of the detective and slams him against the car a few times before hopping into the car to drive away. At this point, the living officer is in front of the car and points his gun at Ghostface, but he doesn't shoot, which is understandable considering that Hallie and Sidney are in the back of the car, but that allows Ghostface to hit the gas. Luckily for the detective, since this is a normal car and not one of those trucks with unnecessarily giant-ass hoods, the officer is flipped onto the hood of the car and not struck in any vital organs. However, he isn't able to do much from the hood of a moving car, and eventually Ghostface runs the car into some construction materials, which causes a metal pole to impale and to kill the detective. I feel that, unlike his partner, this detective had plenty of time to take action. He could have shot at Ghostface earlier, and he had plenty of time to roll off the hood and shoot at the car later on. Because I feel like there was time and opportunity for other options, I'm going to say that he could have lived. Up next, at 1 hour 32 minutes in, Hallie is stabbed to death by Ghostface. At this point, Hallie and Sidney escape the detective's car by pulling back the fencing between the front and back seats and crawling over a seemingly unconscious Ghostface to leave through the car's window. Then the two begin to run away, but Sidney decides to go back and unmask the killer. When Sidney gets to the car, she realizes Ghostface is gone, and that is when Hallie is attacked by the killer from behind. There are so many things that could have gone differently here. For starters, a shot from the perspective of where Hallie is standing shows the detective's car and shows that Ghostface is no longer in the car, so the two did not have to separate to see that the killer was no longer there. Secondly, the two had just spent several minutes crawling over the killer, so they absolutely could have just unmasked them then and there. And finally, the second detective to die had left his gun on the hood of the car. If Sidney had been more aware of her surroundings, she could have seen the gun and used it to shoot Ghostface dead while he was still in the front seat of the detective's vehicle. Because of this, I think the two could have managed to kill or simply avoid the killer, and Hallie could have lived. At 1 hour 37 minutes in, Sidney's boyfriend Derek is shot dead by one of the Ghostface killers, who has revealed himself as Mickey, a member of their friend group. Derek had been hazed and tied to a prop on the theater stage by his fraternity brothers for giving a necklace with his Greek letters to Sidney. And just as Sidney was to free him, Mickey used her trauma to cause her to doubt Derek's innocence, as her boyfriend and his best friend had tried to kill her in the past. When Sidney does not untie Derek, Mickey shoots him dead, and I really do not think that there's anything Derek could have done here. Or Sidney for that matter, as her hesitation is completely understandable. That being said, Derek's death is slated. Up next is Mickey at 1 hour 41 minutes in. At this point, Gail has been brought in at gunpoint by Billy Loomis's mother, who was undercover as a local news reporter, and it is revealed to us that she is the second killer. Though shortly after the two talk about their plans, Mrs. Loomis shoots Mickey dead. She does this because Mickey wants to get caught and have an infamous trial, while she just wants revenge for the death of Billy. because of how sudden and fatal Miss Loomis's actions are, I'm going to say that Mickey's death is slated. Side note, later on Mickey does pop up again for a few moments when Gale and Sidney then shoot him to death, but I'm just going to say that Miss Loomis is the cause of death here because after this, he doesn't have a chance. Our final death occurs at 1 hour 48 minutes in as Cotton Weary, the man Sidney had falsely identified as her mother's killer, shoots Mrs. Loomis in the head. This whole scene was wild. Miss Loomis had a knife to Sidney's throat, but she couldn't do much with that, and Cotton had a gun, so he clearly had the power in the situation. So, Miss Loomis tried to convince Cotton to shoot at Sidney as being the sole survivor would give Cotton fame. The man is hungry for publicity and had aggressively asked Sidney to do an interview with him earlier, to which she said no. Now, with a knife to her throat and a gun pointed at her, Sidney agrees to do the interview and Cotton shoots Miss Loomis dead. Since Cotton held the power in this situation, and being the only survivor would have put him in a risky situation, as Gale had called the police earlier and told them that Cotton was the killer, after she found him covered in blood, I'm going to say that Miss Loomis's death is slated. All in all, Scream 2 leaves us with 10 kills. Of the dead, 6 were slated, 1 was unclear, and 3 could have lived. With the release of the Stab movie, talks of the media's effects on the minds of killers, and the potential for both real-life and on-screen sequels, tensions are high for Sidney, and the community around her seems to either brush things off or get too involved, making things just chaotic enough for the killers to do some damage. Anyways, thank you all for watching today's video. If you have any thoughts to add or movies you'd like me to take a look at next, leave a comment below. Also, please consider leaving a like and subscribe to support me. As always, be good people, love others, and take care of yourselves. Peace.